Hello, welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Francis Panola, and I'm a personal development and recovery coach based outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And besides being a recovery coach, I have personal lived experience in recovery. And, my personal experience, even in the city of Philadelphia, going down to Kensington, goes back to the 90s as a teenager. And I've seen, how things have changed, how drugs have changed, how the street environment has changed, how basically the culture, how the world has changed going back from the 90s until now. From my own lived experience, then working in recovery, just watching the different news, things around the world, seeing how are things changing, how are things developing, what are the different drug trends, what are different things that you're seeing around the world gives you a better picture of, where we're headed from where we came from. All right, so let's get started. First, I want to start off with a little graph that I actually have hanging in my office. And this is the rate of national drug involved overdose deaths among all ages 1999 to 2021. And something I really like to point out is, and I've been in literal drug treatment going back since the 90s. My first time in drug treatment was 14. And anybody who's been in the rooms, has heard like the three ways that this thing ends up is death, jails, and institutions. Okay. Well, I was hearing this in the 90s, the 2000s. If you're looking at this graph, we're at, maybe 20,000 people for the entire country. Philadelphia, for example, back in like the 90s and 2000s, would have like 100 people maybe in the entire city overdose. Then it skyrockets till you're at 2,000 per year. And just like with these overdoses at a national level, all of a sudden they start skyrocketing right around 2015, 2015. That's the introduction of fentanyl. Now, you also, if you look at these other lines, you're seeing methamphetamine, which is the yellow line, cocaine, because now they're seeing more people with polysubstance, more people involving more drugs at once because the supply is more mixed, whereas drugs used to be more isolated. Now the supply is mixed together, so when people are overdosing, they have multiple substances inside their body. But also that introduction of fentanyl has just skyrocketed things like you wouldn't believe. So if they were talking about death, jails, and institutions back in like the early mid 2000s, like you're not even getting to the jails or institution now. People are just dying. We're at like 100,000 people a year now, just dropping like flies. So I mean, it's just we're in a whole new ball game as far as that's concerned. So let's look at some of the pieces of the puzzle and some of the different factors that are at play that are causing some of this shift and some of the change, worldwide with drugs and substances. Part of it's science. People are trying to achieve some new level of high, and especially with something like opiates, the further and further you progress into that, the closer and closer you're getting towards death. There people are trying to achieve some new ultimate level of high, and that's like you're basically giving yourself anesthesia or sedating yourself on your own. Like you're taking yourself right to that point of almost death. Like that, it's not good. And I lived like that for so long, and that's what I mean. Like I understand the futility of the mindset, unfortunately, of a lot of these users. So they're seeking out these new substances, fentanyl, nitazene, trying to achieve some new level of high that you're not going to get. You're just going to die. That's just the reality of the situation. Another factor is greed. Things are just cheaper to produce. Like drugs, street drugs, a bag of heroin used to be $10 in Philadelphia. Now a bag of fentanyl is 5. How is it that drugs get better and cheaper? Like that's just not how capitalism seems to work. So, things usually get cheaper when they get worse in quality. It also has to do with shipping, how they're moving things around the world, both through trucks, on boats, through the mail. A lot of people say that a lot of this different stuff is coming across the border, and yes, some of it does, but a lot of stuff's coming through the mail. But I don't think the average, even American, is going to tolerate having their mail slow down if they have to check all the packages or all of the mail that comes to the United States. If they have to literally go through everything and it slows down our process of getting goods, getting our mail, literally people just aren't ready for that. So here we are. It's going to continue. Then you have the factors at play like different countries and what they're producing, as far as things like poppies and opium versus places just using chemical manufacturing for fentanyl. What are the different geopolitical factors around the world? What are things going around the world that change like the war in Afghanistan, how did that affect opium and poppy production then to the United States? Like, and then how did the United States leaving Afghanistan change that? Like look at the way things are going. I even get nervous speaking about half of this stuff, but just kind of look at how the trends are going, how all of a sudden there's all this heroin, now there's not. Now there's fentanyl coming from China, chemicals coming from China, and I'll explain kind of why that's part of the process now. So let's look at some of the players. You have the chemists. You have people who understand how to build some of these new things. Whoever decided to start making these nitazines, okay? So these are a old opioid that they had developed in like the 50s or 60s that it really wasn't worth it. The level of analgesia, the level of like pain management that you'd get versus the respiratory suppression or your risk of overdose just wasn't there. So they shelved it. Well, somebody brought it back. And now we've been seeing it in Philadelphia now for over a year. And this stuff is stronger than fentanyl. They're not even like, they're giving people literally, you can look this up, like 6 doses of Narcan in an emergency room and they're still overdosing. The stuff metanitazine that can cause cardiac arrest while they're overdosing. Like this stuff is so nasty. And somebody's idea is to introduce this to the supply for whatever reason. Maybe it's cheaper, it's easier to make, but people are doing this. Some chemists, it ain't the average user doing this stuff. It's people like chemists. Then you have producers, farmers. Now the average person, like a farmer making cocaine or a farmer growing poppies, they're not chemists. They're not doing this stuff. These people are just hard up people trying to make a living as well. Don't fault none of these people, okay? Then you have the traffickers who are kind of distributing this stuff. Now, instead of dealing with farmers, they'd rather just set up labs and have chemicals like fentanyl, methamphetamine, MDMA, just set up chemical labs. So now you have trafficking of just precursors and chemicals. Then eventually that makes its way down to distributors, down to street and local dealers. Now suppose they even start out with a product, whether it's cocaine, methamphetamine. Now the street and local dealer just, in order to make more money, now they're stepping on it, mixing it with whatever stuff they can find. So by the time that the user, the person that's on the street buying this stuff, they have zero clue what's in it. And on top of all that, you have the DEA, the FBI, local police who are going after all of these people. And a lot of time it's the average user, the people on the street that are getting hit with a lot of this stuff. That's who really winds up paying. They're paying the money, they're paying the cost. They're the people that are dying 100,000, people a year. Like that's the people I'm serving, not the people can't make their way through this little process, that maybe they're a user and then become a street local dealer, distributor, or vice versa, but it's just a shame all the way around. So some of the factors at play, the rise of new chemical drugs and their analogs like fentanyl. So for a little while, when I say analogs, for example, in China, when they were making new types of fentanyl, so when it went from fentanyl to carfentanil to acrylfentanyl, for a little while, they didn't have a law that said if it was a new chemical, a new type of fentanyl was illegal. So they had to pass a new law every time, so they just kind of keep altering the chemical structure a little bit to make it a new chemical so that way it was legal. And then they passed like an analogs act, as they call it, saying basically if you're making something that's almost identical to something else that's serving the same purpose, it's also illegal. Either way, China's a massive country. Okay, you got 1 billion people, giant land area. Good luck trying to stop all fentanyl production in China. Just like good luck trying to stop all drug production in the United States or in Mexico. Like this stuff's going to be there. Unfortunately, it's a lot of the culture, the thought process from the top down of these organizations that have decided just fentanyl's cheaper and easier to make. Bath salts, spice, K2. Instead of growing pot, you'd rather spray a chemical on some plant. So K2 and spice sprung up all around Philadelphia, kind of this like gray area. People are smoking it. Doesn't really show up on drug tests. That's why the average user, for they're on probation, parole, they're smoking this stuff. And it's way worse for you even than pot. And it's like some lab chemical kind of cannabinoid. It's pretty much just where we're going these days, is chemicals that can achieve the same effect, hit maybe receptors in a similar way, but who knows what other receptors they're hitting or other effects they're having. So you also have concentrated forms of drugs and chemical precursors. They're smaller and easier to transport. So by cooking things down by making them smaller into a powder form. They're just easier for them to transport. And also, they can potentially alter them chemically so that way if they test it, it appears as something else, and then they can remove that chemical after it crosses a border so that way they can extract just the drug that they want. So just kind of using science to try and cheat all these different methods with chemicals. Like that's where we're at. So we're just so far removed from actual any kind of natural substance, if that's what you're looking for. It's insane at this point. So also changes in access to chemical precursors have changed what substances are being created. So P2P meth. So instead of having like ephedrine meth, so in Mexico made it a lot harder for people to get ephedra. The United States has made it harder for people to get ephedra. That you're seeing now this P2P meth, which causes higher rates of psychosis, mental illness, the skin issues. Like it's literally not the same meth that my parents' generation was doing in the 70s. This P2P meth is a whole different thing. Like I explain this to clients, like they're doing this meth, like, oh, well, my parents' generation didn't see this like rate of psychosis. Yeah, well, ours is. It's not the same kind of meth. It's on a whole new different level. So people are just bugging out, wind up on like episode of Cops. I don't even know if that show's in existence, but that's why people are freaking out and experiencing more psychosis these days. It's a different isomer of meth. And they literally could spend money, I've read articles on this, to use a filter to filter out that other isomer to make like a cleaner kind of meth. They're not going to do that because once again, it's all about greed, just making money. So, the rules have changed and the average person playing the game didn't know. Like, people didn't realize the meth changed under them on the street, became P2P meth. All of a sudden, the people that were using heroin, 2015, now it's fentanyl. And now in 2024, now we're at nitazene. And like, when I talk to clients about nitazene, they've never heard any of this stuff, but it's been here. You can look this up. They've been testing it in bags since like October, was it 2022? I forget that was, or 2023. Like, it's been here. And people are seeing this stuff. They're dying from it, but they don't even know what it is they're ingesting if they're buying drugs off the street. Also, you have xylazine. That's that stuff called trank. So now people literally, it's rotting people's flesh off. What it does is a vasoconstrictor. So not even at the site of injection. Suppose you're shooting in your arm. Well, it can start cutting off blood supply to your fingers, to your toes. So people literally, they go to take off their glove and like their pieces of their finger coming off. Like people are just getting amputations left and right. And I get the harm reduction people like trying to help people, but you're literally cleaning these wounds, and it's not about even the wound. It's about cutting off the blood supply. Yes, it's becoming gangrenous and it's getting infected, but also when you're injecting, you're cutting off the blood supply and creating the necrotic tissue. You can clean the wounds all you want. As long as you're injecting trank, this is what's going to happen, this trank. This, it's basically like, almost like a blood pressure medicine. It's an analog of like clonidine or like catapress. So it's like tanking your blood pressure enough so it makes you feel woozy, like you're high, and that's trank. Like this is what they're giving you nowadays. It's literally rotting people's flesh off for $5 a bag. It's some fentanyl and some trank. Like, it's just insane. As a person who's seen the shift of this stuff since way back in the day, who was a heroin addict down in Kensington, like who literally started overdosing when the fentanyl first started showing up in 2015, or 2012. Before that, like, it's just insane the way things are going. So that's why this is part of what keeps me in recovery and away from street drugs, period. So I don't want the crap that they're selling these days. You might as well try and sell me rat poison. Like, I know what's in these bags and it's bullshit. Whether I can say it on YouTube, but like, it's insane. If you're down there, if anybody's out there, like the people that are down there, I get it. You're hurt people. You're trying to cope with something. You have trauma in your background, whatever it is. But like the people that are down there buying these street drugs, it's just insane. You have no clue. They might as well have rat poison in there, really. Might as well just be selling you rat poison. You're going to go inject it in your veins. Like, it's insane. So that's why, I'm for harm reduction. Find something that works for you, whether it's MAT, different kinds of treatment, even medical cannabis, whatever it is that works for you, that at least you know what it is that you're getting versus that stuff. But lastly, thank you. This is a video I've been meaning to make because I think it's something that's super important that people need to understand. Maybe I don't always convey the message as well as I possibly could, but I think that it's important just to get this information out there. Thank you. And as always, for any private personal coaching, feel free to contact me through my website or my email address, and I'll put it in the link below. All right, thank you. Have a good day. Bye.